Hi guys and ladies, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today I have a continuation of This Year in Perfume. And we're going along into the 90s if you've been following my series here. We basically started many decades ago. We aggregated some years together when we had some lean years, and we hit the 80s, which is my favorite time in perfumery. And you know, I was a little bit worried as we are going into the 90s because we're really about to hit that aquatic wave that I'm not the biggest fan of, those marine aquatic fragrances. But I keep continuing to be surprised by how many interesting fragrances are on the list. Some of these fragrances from the year 1993 are just absolutely amazing. They're actually some of my favorites. And they're not really ranked, but I did save some of my favorite, the last, let's say, 5, 6, 7 fragrances are amazing. The first 5, 4 or 5, whatever it is, they're not really ranked, but I did kind of put them somewhat in an order. I would have a hard time ranking this list. But before we get into the fragrances, let us do scent of the day, which is right here. I've been practicing my French. So this is Actor by the House of Azzaro. Now, this fragrance is what I would consider to be in the top 3 vintage masculine rose fragrances of all time. And the other 2 that fall into this category, if you will. One is Aramis 900, which came out well over a decade before Actor came out. And then the second one is Van Cleef & Arpels Pour Homme, which it also came out in the late 70s. Whereas Aramis 900 came out in the early 70s. So this is the late 80s. This is actually 1989. As you can see, this is a little mini 25 ml bottle. The sprayer on it is kind of shite, to be honest with you. But the fragrance is not. I actually really like this fragrance for a rose fragrance. As the weather starts to warm up, it's going to be 93 degrees Fahrenheit here in March in Texas. Ugh, beating. I like wearing these rose fragrances, so I'll whip out Lyric Man and stuff like that. But Actor is this kind of spicy masculine rose. It really sticks with that 80s DNA, that masculine 80s DNA. Very spicy fragrances. There's leather in the base. There is nutmeg, which I like nutmeg because it kind of puts a bow on everything, if you will. It keeps everything in its place. It's almost like you have atoms trying to get out of whack, and the nutmeg just keeps everything in all the molecules holding in place, if you will. And there's cardamom, but there's this beautiful masculine rose, if you will, if you're a believer in that kind of thing. There's also a beautiful oak moss in the base. I really like this fragrance, and this is the only bottle I have. I should get a backup bottle, but you have to like rose. The rose in here is not shy at all. It really comes out and announces its presence. But it's really good. This would be a niche fragrance today, hands down. And these little 25 ml bottles that they sold back in the day, these can be had for very cheap. And as you can see, I've given this quite a few wears, and look, there's still a lot of juice left. So, especially when you have a collection like my size, you don't always need 100 ml bottles. I was talking about somebody with this just the other day. So before we get into the fragrances themselves that actually fell in the year of 1993, let's do some important events and some movies, just to kind of set the tone. So 1993, some important events that happened. Bill Clinton was elected president. The very first World Trade Center bombing in New York happened. People forget there was a first one before 9/11. That happened in 1993. Also, that crazy thing down in Waco, that siege of Waco began in February of 1993. So I was just a little kid. But I remember the news talking about it, and you had the issue with Janet Reno and all that good stuff. Some songs. I'd Do Anything for Love, but I Won't Do That by Meatloaf. I Will Always Love You, Whitney Houston. Can't Help Falling in Love, UB40, Tag Team. Whoop, there it is. I know you probably want me to sing those, but I will not. I'll probably break the microphone on my phone if I start trying to sing those songs. So let's get to the last part of introducing the year, which is the movies. And one in particular sticks out to me. There were other movies that came out in 1993, but I should say two in particular stick out. Number one is Aladdin. I remember going to see that as a kid, and I remember my mom bribing me by saying, come on, it's not all kid stuff. There's sword fights and stuff like that in there. And then, of course, Jurassic Park. I remember we used to have these Jurassic Park trading cards when I was a kid. And everyone wanted the young girl in the movie, because when we were kids, we all thought she would be our girlfriend, But Jurassic Park was a huge movie in 1993. It really takes me back. It was everywhere. I remember thinking it was the coolest thing I've ever seen when you're a little kid. I mean, obviously the dinosaurs with the technology kind of catching up. That's one that definitely sticks out. That just screams 1993 for me. All right, let's do the fragrances, because I know that's why you guys are here. So the first one, I'm a little lukewarm on. I can't decide whether I like this fragrance or I don't like the fragrance. And it's a fragrance called Biblos for Men. Biblos for Men. This is an eau de toilette. This is actually a splash bottle, if you will. And this fragrance it's a little bit of an anomaly for me, because it is spicy, it is citrusy. It's almost like it's announcing the 1990s, like it's rolling out the red carpet for what's going to come, because you do get this big citrusy, there is violet leaf in this. If you watched my violet leaf, this is not a top 10 violet leaf episode recently, you probably saw this video. There is a violet leaf accord. This is discontinued, by the way. There's also a couple of green notes. So you get this Artemisia tarragon thing going on that mixes with the spices, the thyme, the nutmeg, the cardamom. But it seems very citrusy. And you guys know citrus fragrances are not my favorite. So I will give this a full wear again soon and report back. But this can be had for pretty cheap. If you're into those summery citrus fragrances, this might be one to check out, because there is a little bit more going on. They put more in the fragrances. Even in the early 90s, you had oak moss, patchouli, vetiver, cedar. So there is some stuff going on. I just can't decide whether it's a like or a dislike yet. It's not a bad fragrance. It's probably better than most stuff you can just get nowadays at Macy's or something, but it's not my favorite. Another one that's not my favorite that people talk about like it's a unicorn is this. This is a fragrance from Givenchy, and it's called Onsensei. Now, Onsensei is almost like, let me just show you guys something real quick, because it's almost like a niche version of this. This is Nino Cerruti Pour Homme from the 1970s. I shouldn't have said niche version. I should have said more modernized version, because the DNA is similar on both. But for some reason, the quality, the blend, the ingredients, everything in this turns me on way more. I love this fragrance. This is one of my favorite, masculine floral fragrances, if you will. This has that same DNA going for it. This came out in 93, obviously. It wouldn't be in the list. It has this green floral thing going on, because there is basil, And it's also a little bit fruity because there's blackcurrant in the top as well with mandarin orange. And then the heart is iris, magnolia, lily of the valley, and mastic. And the base is fir balsam. So this was a brave release, and I think it was a flop at the time, but it turned into kind of this unicorn, and it's discontinued, obviously. This is the older bottle. The newer bottle looks like the way that Givenchy markets Xerius. If you've ever seen Xerius in the new bottle, not the old splash I've shown on my channel, the new bottle, that's what the latest version of this looked like. But people complain it's been reformulated. You guys have heard all that talk before. And so Onsensei, to me, is kind of one of those fragrances. It's almost like if you watch Rich Mitch's channel, you know he did a first impression of a fragrance that I absolutely bashed called Symphonium by Serge. And he said it's just a bad idea. I just feel like this was just a bad idea at the time. It didn't go over very well, and it just doesn't. I'm sure it may be a little bit more mass appealing than your average fragrance that I like to talk about on my channel, because I talk about a lot of challenging stuff. But it just doesn't excite me for whatever reason. And there's an underlying theme when I wear it. I constantly think of suntan lotion for some reason. I don't know where that's coming from either. It could be the florals in some way. Maybe the mixture of magnolia, lily of the valley, and mastic. I don't know, but I keep getting this suntan lotion thing, and I really don't want to smell like that. So I will wear this begrudgingly because I have to do a review on it for you guys at some point. And usually I'll wear it in the summer once it gets warm. But a fragrance that I got, speaking of summer, that came out in 1993 from the house of Guy Laroche, which up until just, I believe, earlier this year, this was the last release for men, I think, that they had. They just released Drakkar. Intense, okay, as a flanker. That's like 50 years after after that fragrance came out. This came out in 1993, and it's called, let's see if you can see it. It's called Horizon. Can you see the distributor there? This is a Cosmere bottle. Whoops. No, of course you couldn't, because it was upside down. Let's try this again. Now can you see the distributor? So this is a Cosmere bottle. Jonathan, 1970, subscriber and what I would call now friend in the fragrance community, alerted me that these were on Fragrance X or Fragrance Net or Fragrance.com, or I don't remember which one, for like $7 for 50 ml. So I scooped up 4 of them because I couldn't say no at $7. I just wanted to get rid of them, obviously. And if you take a look at the bottle, you can probably guess that this is an aquatic fragrance, which I normally don't like. But this is an early aquatic. And they used a lot of things that I actually do like. Like, for example, there's mint, there's aldehydes, there is this sea salt note. So if you remember, the aquatic fragrances that I like, for example, are stuff like Aralfa is a good example of an aquatic that I like. And there's a lot going on in that fragrance. I wouldn't even call Aralfa an aquatic. This has the same setup where there's a ton of things going on. There's sea salt, there's mint, there's artemisia, there's fennel. There's a fennel note in here, which also famously shows up in Coriolan by Guerlain. That has a beautiful fennel note in it as well. There's galbanum, there's bay leaf, pimento, black pepper, thyme, moss, patchouli, sandalwood, and cypress. So as you can see, it's almost like they took this classic masculine DNA, if you will, with a lot of green notes like galbanum and mint, and then, you know, there's sandalwood, patchouli, cypress is a classic masculine note in perfumery, artemisia, and then they added some aldehydes and sea salt and tried to almost make it feel like a aquatic, even though it's not. So it's an interesting fragrance. I Wore it to bed once or twice. I've never given it a full wear, but once it really warms up, once we hit the dog days of summer, as I like to say, I will give this a full wear and report back. Okay, so we're moving on. Now we're moving on into the ones that are getting better and better as the list goes on. This is Boss Elements. This is actually a great fragrance. If this really was a ranked list, this would probably be a little bit higher. Boss Elements is a creation by Corinne Cachin, which I've never heard of any of his or her work before. But what's interesting about this fragrance, this has a very transitional season feel to me. So like this would be perfect for fall or maybe even spring, in my opinion, this kind of weather. There's citruses at the top, there's bergamot, mandarin orange, and then there's this plum notes. Look at the bottle, by the way. It has this mountain range feel, like you're looking at something that was created by the elements. Great name, great marketing, by the way. I really wish brands would do stuff like this again. This is probably the last of the great Boss fragrances. I think about Boss Number 1, Boss Sport, and Boss Elements when I think about great Boss fragrances. And the twist here is that this also has a lot of classic masculine notes. It has tarragon, thyme, juniper, oak moss, sandalwood, cedar, but then there's this plum note that is thrown in the top and the mid, so it stays with you. It's not like you get the plum in the opening and it dissipates. The plum really kind of stays with you with this fragrance. And I like what it does. It's modern without being an aquatic. I think it would work fantastic in fall. It even looks like, you know, the bottle looks like it's made for fall, like the changing of the leaves. But it also works well in spring. I'd say probably even any weather, because it does have that woody undertone of the cedar and sandalwood mixture. And then, of course, oak moss before they really restricted it. So that's one that is a discontinued fragrance that you can still find for respectable prices. The prices are not insane. Okay, next is a fragrance I've shown off a couple times before, and I did something special and I dug out the empty bottle of the fragrance that I wore from about 2016 to 2020 before I found this. And then once I found this, I said, no way am I ever going back to that other fragrance. This is Eau de Rochas pour Homme. And this is the older bottle that has the cap that matches the bottle itself. The newer ones have this gray, just standard cap. If you look it up, you'll see what I'm talking about. It also looks like if you put your fingers on the back of it, like your fingerprint is making waves in the back of the bottle. It's absolutely beautiful. And again, love the design. Wish houses did stuff like this more. This is one of the best citrus fresh fragrances you can buy. There's a beautiful floral element to this as well. And there are times that I despise florals, and there are times that I absolutely love florals. And this is a love for me. So what I did, and you'll see this fragrance again in the next iteration, when we do the next episode for 1994, because this came out in 1993. This is a $20 fragrance. 1994, Creed released this. I'm going to show this again next time we do one of these year videos, but this is a fragrance called Neroli Sauvage. And I went up into the attic and I hunted down my bottle that I used, and I saved the bottle because I don't throw anything away. And you'll see this is a 2015 batch that I had back before real reformulation started with Creed. So this was a 4-ounce bottle, and I absolutely drained this bottle. I mean, there is nothing left other than I can still smell it from the atomizer a bit. Even though this has been gone for a couple years from my collection now. But this fragrance and this fragrance are almost identical. Now, I can't speak for the new version, but this version with this cap, the original vintage, almost identical to Neroli Sauvage. Neroli Sauvage is a $300, $400, $500 fragrance. This is a $20 fragrance. And of course, when I was younger and started in this fragrance journey of mine, if you will, I went for the most expensive stuff. I went and bought stuff like this because, damn it, it's the most expensive. It must be the best. And learn from my mistake, ladies and gentlemen, because I wish I had enough juice to do a comparison video, but from my memory, what I remember, I think that actually this is the better fragrance. I think that Creed basically ripped Rochas off. And the fact that it was the very next year, the similarities are just too much. So you'll see that Creed again in 1994, but I just wanted to showcase it because it's been up in my attic for years, and I hunted it down so I could show you guys the quality of this fragrance that you're basically getting. There's aldehydes, basil, bergamot, lime, mandarin orange, lemon vervain, and then the heart is where you get the florals like normal, but you get freesia, lily of the valley, carnation, jasmine, rose, violet, coriander, and then the base is amber, oak moss, musk, vetiver, and cedar. The hotter it is, the better this fragrance smells. It smells absolutely stunning in the summer. And again, you want to get the bottle that was made by Rochas. You don't want to get the Procter & Gamble bottle if you can avoid it. It's deeper, it's richer, it's all that good stuff. So that's Eau de Rochas, one of the best bang for your buck fragrances you can buy for a summer perfume. Okay, next fragrance is the first fragrance for men from this house. They released a fragrance for women a year or two before, I think. This is Animale for men. Look at the bottle. Looks very cheap, doesn't it? And that's because it is. It's a cheap bottle with a cheap little plastic cap on the front. But the fragrance is not cheap. And in fact, the one they put out the year after is even better. But this is the first one that they put out. How about that atomizer? Even though this is the 90s, how 80s is that? I absolutely love it. The other thing I love about this house is that they never sold out. They are still making their own fragrances for their own house. They have their own distribution. Apparently, this is a huge brand in South America. So this fragrance, what is it? It's this fresh, spicy type fragrance, and that's what was popular as we were going on into the 90s. But what sets this apart is there's this lovely lavender floral combination. So where the florals here kind of fail to my nose, and I paid way more money for this than I did for this, by the way. That just goes to prove that cost does not always equal quality, or does not always equal a fragrance that you love in the fragrance world, right? I did the same thing here. I paid way more for Neroli Sauvage than I did for Eau de Rochas pour Homme. Here, this is a cheapie. In fact, you can still get it. This fragrance has this lavender floral combo that just works for my nose. The floral that stands out is freesia, and there's this neroli note, which neroli is normally a very expensive note, and even in expensive fragrances, that neroli note can be very hard to do well. Here, it feels like it's done well to my nose. It doesn't smell cheap. Lavender, neroli, freesia. The base is oak moss, leather, and vetiver. Now, they did a flanker of this called Animale, two Animals instead of just one. That's a completely different fragrance, and that's much closer to Amen, which is the one that is, Animale is the one that's most popular from this house. People overlook this one, but... Oh, by the way, I should mention that the advertising campaign uses a famous Brazilian mixed martial arts fighter, Mauricio Rua. So that just, I mean, this is a huge brand in South America, believe it or not. And they're big into perfume down there. But for a cheapie, this is definitely one to check out, especially if you like summer type fragrances. I like Animale a little bit better, but this is a great fragrance. Okay, now we're gonna go to a fragrance that I just decanted, and I might wear this as my scent of the day tonight or tomorrow. This is Chanel's Cristalle Eau de Parfum. This is a 125 ml bottle I got from Anuj. I left the wrapper on because it had that Montreal ink sticker on the back, and I thought that was kind of cool. But I believe this is a 2001 bottle, so I think it's a little bit over 20 years old. And I'm so glad to have this because if you go on Fragrantica, people are constantly complaining, we can't find any stock, they're out of stock, supply chain issues, you know, on and on and on. Apparently, I haven't worn it yet, but apparently it's this green fragrance that is a little bit fresh, a little bit similar to number 19, but there's this almost like this smoky cigarette dirty vibe underneath Cristalle that Eugene absolutely loves. And I know he likes really refined fragrances. He likes fine French perfumery, if you will. So there's Lily of the Valley, Bergamot, Mandarin Orange, Peach, and Lemon. The mid is Hyacinth, Iris. I'm excited about that. I love Iris. Jasmine, Brazilian Rosewood, and then the base is Oak Moss and Vetiver. So I wonder if it's like a smoky vetiver they're using to give off that cigarette vibe. I wonder where that's coming from. But I'll give this a wear either tonight or tomorrow. I'm very excited to get my nose on that one. Next is a rare beast. Rare indeed. And this is actually the original version. If you look this up on Parfumo, you will see that it says it's called Basala, B-A-S-A-L-A. My version is called Basara, B-A-S-A-R-A. So they actually changed the name halfway through. This is the original version. And Shisedo / Serge Lutens put out a couple fragrances in 1993 that were hits. This came out by a perfumer named Dominique Presas. And this is citruses with lavender. There is this tobacco spice combination. So think about like this aromatic tobacco, if you will. And then there's sandalwood, leather, and amber in the base. But it all comes together to give off this very masculine aromatic fragrance that uses leather, but not in a way like we're talking about the old school leather fragrances I love. It's not like Leonard Pour Homme or Van Cleef & Arpels Pour Homme or Bel Ami or anything like that. This is different. This is a different take on leather. It's a lot more aromatic. You know, I would probably be a little bit more comfortable wearing this in the heat than I would Bel Ami. However, this is a strong fragrance. Even though it's a little bit more aromatic, it manages to stay bone dry. There is absolutely zero sweetness in this. In fact, if you wanted a tobacco fragrance that was not sweet, I mentioned there is a Rogue Perfumery tobacco called Tabac. I can't think of it right now, but it's a Rogue perfumer. It's let me just look it up. Rogue Tabac Vert. It's called Tabac Vert. There's zero sweetness in that tobacco fragrance either, for the most part. Same thing here. There's almost no sweetness in Basala or Basara, and so impossible to find almost. But if you stumble across a bottle like I did, get it. It is an absolute amazing fragrance for men. Another amazing fragrance that came out in 1993 and is now discontinued is a flanker of one of my favorite fragrances of all time. This is called Jazz Prestige. Okay, now Prestige caught a lot of hype in the YouTube community from folks like me and Rich Mitch and Rudy and stuff like that because The box of this actually says Mysore sandalwood on the ingredients. I don't have the box here. It's upstairs. I should have grabbed it. But it literally says Mysore sandalwood, which, you know, in 1993 they could do. In 2003, maybe not so much, right? But this is supposed to be almost like a easier to swallow version of jazz, if you will. They made it a little bit more floral. You know, they toned down some of that 80s jazz notes, if you will. It's a little bit citrusy. There's anise in the top, but there's so much going on. There's anise, there's bergamot, there's fruity notes, there is pepper, lavender, there's ginger, there's jasmine, geranium, carnation, caraway, rose, there's cinnamon, there's cypress, and then the base is where you get that special Mysore sandalwood, cedar, benzoin, oak moss, patchouli, amber, leather. There's so much going on in this fragrance. This is such a great fragrance. I would have a hard time ranking this or jazz. I mean, because to my mind, jazz is such a special fragrance. I would have a hard time putting the flanker first, but I mean, I would have to think on that one. Great fragrance if you can find it. Anuj used to have bottles of Jazz Prestige. I don't know if he does anymore. Going back to the house of Serge Lutens, my favorite spicy amber fragrance of all time is Ombre Sultan. I almost said Ombre Supreme. Ombre Sultan. And this is in the older presentation. This is the one you want if you can find it. I hate those new bottles with the black label. This is so good. I mean, look at the color of the juice. It's perfect. The color of the juice is perfect for this fragrance. This is Christopher Sheldrake's masterpiece, one of his masterpieces. The amber in this, labdanum, vanilla, tolu balsam, styrax, just those first 5 notes I mentioned are an absolute banger. And then what he did, and the reason I said spicy amber, this is my favorite spicy amber, is because there is notes that you would probably find in grandma's spice cupboard. There's oregano, there's myrtle, there's bay leaf, there's coriander, and they really hit you in the opening. So you get hit with this beautiful blast of spices, and then it just dries into this perfect amber. I mean, this is almost a perfect fragrance. I don't know if you could improve on Ombre Sultan. Seriously. It is, you know, some people say they prefer L'air du Desert Marocain. And while I think that's a good fragrance, I'm not one of the people that says, oh, that's a crap fragrance and this is the best fragrance ever. I do think this is the best amber to my nose, but I also think L'air du Desert Marocain is a good fragrance, but I don't think it's better than Ombre Sultan. Okay, last 2, and they're special. Which one to do first? Let's do this one first. I don't know if I could pick between these 2. This is Escada pour Homme. Escada pour Homme is so close to my heart because I love this DNA, and I've said this before, I'll probably say it again. There's a handful of fragrances from the late 80s, early 90s that fall into this category. Something was going around in the fragrance community at that time, right? Where they were using similar DNA, if you will. So in one of my previous videos, we talked about Heritage. In a couple videos before, if you go strictly by the This Year in Perfume, we talked about Jazz from 1988. Escada pour Homme. There are others that are in this, you know, they share this DNA, if you will. And this DNA to me is something that I feel so comfortable with. This is a take on Heritage, which came out a year earlier and was a hit. So I could totally see why Escada did this. They took the Heritage DNA and they tried to kind of do their own thing. They added notes like cognac. So This is almost like a boozy take on Heritage, if you will. And it came out a year later, but it's very, it's very, you know, to my mind, it's very versatile. You can dress it up, you can dress it down. I could wear this to a, you know, ball in a tuxedo. I could wear this in my ELO t-shirt right now, sitting at home on a Sunday. I just feel, I feel so comfortable with this, and it never, those three fragrances in particular, Escada, Homme, Heritage, Jazz, they never let me down. I'm always interested. I'm always enjoying the way that my fragrance is smelling, and you know, the way that it is evolving throughout the day. The last one is a 1993 fragrance that actually probably should be a 1983 fragrance. And if you know my taste, you know that I think this is highly underrated. I think actually Sebastian, who has hundreds of thousands of followers, put this as his #1 vintage fragrance on a video a couple months back. And that kind of shocked me, but I understand why. You won't be able to see the writing on this bottle. This is called Joint by the house of Roccobarocco, which is probably the best name ever. Roccobarocco. 2 C's in the beginning and the end. Rocco, Barocco. I love it. I love this fragrance. This fragrance, if you're an animalic fragrance lover like I am, I love animalic notes. I love dirty fragrances. Diaghilev, Kouros, Antaeus. I mentioned that Suga Parfums Fiona the other day, which is one of my favorite animalic fragrances ever. I mentioned it actually yesterday on my Arise Ladore video. If you like animalic fragrances and you've never smelled Joint, do yourself a favor and just blind buy this. I mean, I don't know why I'm telling you to do that, actually, because I need a backup bottle, and the last time I said that on fragrances like Teatro alla Scala, there was no stock for me to get a backup bottle on. Not easily, anyways. I had to really hunt. But this is blind buy worthy if you share my taste. Absolutely. Joint is a must. The honey, the civet, the ambergris, there's leather. It's so good. It is so good. And I might try to wear this in the warmer weather. I used to only wear these in colder weather. That was my rule, is that I would wear animalic fragrances in the cold. But I think I'm going to try to give stuff like this a shot in the spring and summer this year and just see how it acts. So that's basically the fragrances from 1993 in my collection. I know there's other fragrances from the year 1993, obviously, that I don't have in my collection. If there's some that you love that you think I should check out, I love hearing from you guys. I've said this before, I learn more from you than you do from me, hands down. Without a doubt, that is a true statement. The interaction, the knowledge that my subscribers have, you know, I've got the best 750 or however many subscribers we have right now you could ask for to begin a channel with. So I'm really enjoying the way that the first 4 or 5 months have gone, and I'm going to keep uploading these videos. We've still got some years to go before we end this year in perfumery. We could also go back in time because I started in the 60s, 70s. There's a lot of fragrances that got left out we could do. So we've got a lot of content to do, let's put it that way. So a like and a subscription is always appreciated, but if you don't feel like it, don't. That's not why I'm doing these videos. I just want to share my love and passion for perfumery with you guys. And I hope you learned something from these. You know, this is why I'm doing it, to hopefully you get some tips on fragrances to put on the watch list and maybe buy soon. So thanks for watching. Like to see your faces down below in the comments. Let me know what you think of the video, and I'll see you again tomorrow with another review. Bye.